But, there's been a push to make the military a playground for progressive policies. And it is the last place politically that we want people playing. And I mean, you even see China has an initiative to actually make their men more masculine.
Yeah, I saw that.
And we're going the opposite direction. There is a diversity, equity, and inclusion chief at the Pentagon now who wrote a book that basically called the first responders menaces, and basically painted them as white supremacists, and it's going a very bad direction. I will say this about the military: what people don't understand is it is highly professional. I've always been impressed. There are standards, there's doctrine. And instructors know that they follow that playbook. They mitigate risk to the lowest level because you always have the risk of getting investigated for something like this.
So who's letting these progressive policies infect the military? How is that ever an option? Is that just people who are blissfully unaware because they're on the outside? Like, how does that ever get in to the point where you're considering things like elite groups like the SEALs having to deal with this sort of politically correct nonsense?
Personally, I think the policy of transparency that was made or popularized by President Obama, and this isn't, I'm not attacking President Obama. He was aggressive on the war on terror. He made a lot of aggressive decisions, but there are certain communities where transparency, like the CIA, special operations, is not the best policy, is they should remain in the shadows. And there should be just public trust that we are doing the right things. We don't want anyone to pass away in training. We don't want to get anyone hurt. But we also don't want to advertise our capabilities or our training or our capacities to potential military peers like China or Russia. So the transparency for me, propaganda, do it with the regular military. Keep special operations out of the public.
Even doing it with the regular military, why? Like,
I don't know. I don't have an answer for how it started infiltrating, other than it seems to be the groundswell. I mean, the military is just a group of people from normal societies, so I don't think it's uncommon to see things that our society is dealing with working their way into the military. But I do hope that there is a backstop against it. And in my mind, everything needs to be worked in a reverse direction. What is it we're asking these people to do in the real world execution of their job? Now let's work our training pipeline to prepare those people for that. I don't know where the progressive ideology falls into that or how it infects that or how it got started. And I'm a little bit detached from the teams at this point. I've been out now for almost 10 years, but I still stay in contact with people. And what I am hearing, though, is that it is pushing at the corners and it is pushing at the edges, and it's not enhancing what they're doing. And in their words, not mine, because, again, I've been out of it for almost a decade. In their words, not mine, it's not enhancing their ability to perform on the X.
But I can't understand, if the SEALs are filled with guys like you guys, how does it even get discussed?
There's a bell curve even in the SEAL teams. I mean, you take even the command that we served at which it's not impossible to get to. It's a little bit more difficult. But if you take a team of 50 people, you're going to have your bottom 10% and you're going to have your top 10% and everybody else in between. And it is a melting pot. I mean, I served with people who were just devoutly religious. And then people who, come to find out later, were sociopaths and serial killers. We've talked about that on a previous podcast, and everything in between. So there is diversity of ideas inside of the SEAL community. People think, oh, it's only people who lean to the right. And I would say there are more people who lean to the right, but there are plenty who lean to the left. And we're talking, I mean, I remember team room conversations about religion, about politics, about sexuality. And there was never like, yep, that's it. And we all slapped the table.
So let me say, well, to his point, I wrote a book about this called The Talent War, how special operations and great organizations win on talent. It was about performance and about building high-performing teams and how the special operations goes about it. Because when you think about it, in the private sector, people hire you based on how much industry experience you usually have. Well, in our profession, I can't go to a high school or a college and say, who here has special operations experience? Nobody would raise their hands. So by nature, the assessment and selection process, which we're talking about, basic underwater demolition school, is hire for character, train for skill. And that's why we push these men and women to their limits, their mental and physical limits, because that's where true character emerges. And that's what we're looking for. We're looking for mental toughness, resiliency, the ability to work as a team. And that brings up a point. You know, one of the former commandants in the Marine Corps just wrote an article and basically was arguing, keep your hands off the military. The military runs off a different set of ideologies. Those ideologies are conformity to a degree, which conformity is not always a bad thing. You know, if you have a baseball team, you want some conformity to SOPs, standard operating procedures. But it's also to operate as a team. So in this training, we break people down in their individual selves and we build them up as a team player, where the public sector sort of, let's say they trend towards individuality, which is not bad either. We do want people to be people. Like Andy has a personality, I have a personality, and we almost breed this, I like to call it in the SEAL teams, a healthy disrespect for authority, to push back against I don't want to say my orders. I never gave orders. These are my orders. I've never said that. But hey, here's my decision. This is what we're going to do. If it's not a good idea and I outrank Andy, Andy's going to come back and be like, yeah, we're not going to do that. That's stupid. And this is why. So he does it in a professional and tactful way. But I'm sick and tired. And, you know, I do place very high performing veterans into jobs. That's what I do for a living. But people based off Hollywood have these bad sort of perceptions of what the military is. It's because Paramount and Warner Brothers don't paint us in a good light. We're not the Chris Kyles. This guy and all the guys I served with were the most lethal warriors in the world. I was not. I ended up there, and I was proud to be part of a team. I told Andy, always a bridesmaid, never a bride, meaning I was part of a good team. We got that mission done. We got that bride married. But the most lethal warriors I knew, who no one will ever know in the public, were kind, empathetic, respectful, and they loved their fellow man. And they were husbands, they were fathers, they were sons, they were wives, daughters, mothers. And when they needed to dial empathy down and do the bad part of a job, they did it, and they did it with lethality. And then they dialed the empathy back up. But people naturally gravitate towards Hollywood, and they paint this bad pictures of veterans. And I will always, I came from Atherton, man. It's one of the most affluent towns in America. And I ended up amongst a lot of guys that came from nothing, and their character far outweighs a lot of the people I know in the public sector.
What is it about these movies? Like, why do they paint veterans in that way? And why does it permeate our culture?